الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة
I had no idea how big, how small town Muncie is. I was the only person flying from Chicago to Muncie. It was might be a 10-seater, you know. I was worried to fly that plane, and it landed in a cornfield in Muncie. One of the graduate students went there to pick me up and put me in the student center. I really, literally had tears in my eyes. My wife called me and said, "How do you?" I said, "I'm coming back as soon as possible. I don't know how people live here. There is nothing here."
It was harder to adjust to the time than the culture, because you have a difference of like 6-7 hours. And I remember the first time it took me about 2 weeks just to adjust.
When I accepted to go to Muncie, because I told him that I like to go somewhere there's cornfields and there's mountains, and there's no mountains. He said, "You go to Muncie," and he couldn't find in the globe. He said, "Somewhere here."
I came in June, end of June of 1985, and I got accepted to as a intern in residency program, family practice residency, at Bal Memorial Hospital. This also has some interesting story, and that is when I first was accepted, they put me on probation. They said, because Afghanistan education was very mediocre, and then I went through so much trauma, being in jail and being with freedom fighters, and then here. So, but luckily after 6 months, everybody was very pleased. So then I was happy as well. Then I applied for my fiance, that Bibi, to come to the United States, and then after a year, she joined me.
Oh, I wasn't impressed. I was like, it's very small, but I like small places. But it just looked different because I was in Europe, But then, I was like, I like it, and actually I would stay here. I don't want to, a lot of doctors go to Indy or to bigger cities. I like it here. I don't want to go anywhere.
When I came in here, these parties, dancing, cooking food in the International House, and talk and joke that you dare not do it in Afghanistan here. So it took me out of my way. But so it continued only one year. Then, and I was not the only one. All the international people, especially from the Middle East, these are all Muslims. And they were doing the same thing. So then one Iranian guy came to me and he said, there's a mosque in here. Then I went back, bound to the mosque, and I didn't do all kind of those things I used to do.
At that time, my father had been introduced to the Nation of Islam through his brother, his older brother, Robert Conley. He came back to Muncie and started a chapter here in Muncie. And to my knowledge, that was the first introduction to some form of Islam in the black community in Muncie.
The members of the community were very few. We had some African American community like Amir Shabazz, Rashid Shabazz, Abdur Rahman.
And then he gets associated with the Muslim Student Association here at Ball State, and their advisor is Dr. Mir Masoom Ali, and my dad and Dr. Ali developed a pretty good relationship. Dr. Ali is a mentor to him. He
didn't have any fear to open his mouth. We would sometimes control things, because he was a community leader, he was an activist, so he could say anything. So he was very forceful. And really he was a very strong spokesperson for the Islamic group in Muncie community. He has a lot of contribution if you talk about building the community. When I came here, then I thought my initial goal was to make my children, who were really very small at the time, to make them familiar with the Islam, with the religion, their father, their parents, their grandparents, practice, so that they know where we come from. So that was the reason why I thought that if we have a place, they will know more about the religion, and of course, there will be a place for us to, pray or perform fasting or, celebrate Eid, things like that.
He and Dr. Ali form a relationship, and then then they join together. The Black Muslims and the Muslims, and they have the Islamic Center here, and then everybody starts to come to just one mosque for prayer and for communityism.
And the address was 1717 Ball Avenue. And it was, I believe, purchased originally about 10 years earlier by a group of students, Saudis, and I believe some Libyan students. They raised money and they bought it.
I felt there was some conflict between the students and the local group in the administration of the mosque, not with prayers or anything. And so I thought what we could do, what kind of solution we can find. Then I felt that the mosque is a community thing, and MSA is a Ball State thing. Let us not mix it together. And now there's a lot of people in the community. The mosque has to be taken care of by the local people. Students come for a year, 2, 3, then they leave. So we have to make the decision as a community. So I made a suggestion that we have now 2 groups. One student group, the other one is the Islamic Center group. We call it, we gave a new name, Muncie Islamic Center.
It used to be when the beginning when the student bought the place, and I think they were in the lead. There were not too many community members, and that's why even they had the bylaw. They continue be part of the executive board. The second person, the president and the vice president, was the Muslim Student Association president until recently. For many, many, many years, that was when my husband was the president. The Muslim Student Association was the vice president of the organization. We worked together. It did not kind of split, but we worked together.
It was a nice small community that I remember Ramadan very much because we used to go have dinner every night over there. People used to bring food. Of course, I was a single man at the time, so it was a good meal at night. So we used to go every night during Ramadan, and we would stay for prayers after. Many times we would leave the mosque and go to one of the houses of one of us, and we would sit, have tea, and play cards.
Even the celebration of holiday, the Eid, was very nice organized. There were like around 15 families that they were living here, 15 to 20 families. And we always make sure that we were always together, even though we were from different nationality, different background. And we went to each other's houses to celebrate the holidays, and we fed each other and enjoy each other as a one family, since we're a very small community here.
The mosque or the center was very small church, but we had a great time. Every month we will have a monthly dinner. It will be crowded because it will look crowded, and everybody will bring delicious food.
Oh, like my own family. They welcome me, and I feel like my own family. I didn't feel shy. I didn't feel discriminated or anything. They welcomed me. I was just happy. I was happy there.
That's where we had all of our Sunday school, our monthly dinners, which was just a community gathering, and all of our festivities for Eid, the holidays. And so I have a lot of great memories there. Some things I remember specifically about it was just that the rooms were very open and square, and it kind of forced everyone to have to sit together, which was a good thing because we were all really close, and everyone got to know each other very well. And so I have a lot of fond memories of it.
An old building, relatively small, and it was deteriorated really badly. And also during that time, there were an increase in the number of students, Muslim students that joined in both states, especially Saudi students.
The situation in Bosnia for my family was not good because my grandpa was a refugee in World War I, World War II. My father was a refugee, and I was a refugee in last war, and I think I need try something, because if I not try anything, tomorrow my grandchildren will be a refugee again.
Good evening, I'm Steve Bell, Professor of Telecommunications at Ball State University. We have just heard the President of the United States talk about our challenges as a nation in the wake of last week's terrorism. Now we want to bring those challenges, the questions raised, and the issues involved directly to East Central Indiana.
It's always remind me about, all this worry and say, okay, I left all this behind me to come to here, and then here I go, something happened here.
So I just remember being at school, and everyone was freaking out, and we kind of had to stay after school, and I had no idea what was going on.
My dad used to watch Arabic TV, so I would always see pictures of buildings exploding or, fires and people crying and yelling and running. So to see something like that, it didn't shock me until my parents had to sit down and explain to me that that was in our country where that stuff does not happen.
As I remember, I was taking classes in Ball State, and I went home, and my parents were watching the news, and I just couldn't take it anymore. I just cried and I was upset, and I went outside of my house. Now I'm getting emotional again. Outside of the house, and I just prayed. I said, "This hope there will be some day into this, because I grew up in this kind of thing. My family is suffering, and I'm even though in a safe place, thank God, but I'm suffering for them." And then I decided not to watch television. And I said, my crying is not helping any of those people. I have done enough crying and enough television, news, and that makes me upset that I'm not able to help myself and others.
We have heard at that time, or we had heard of Japanese American that were put in camps. And that was the first thought in our mind that that will be happening.
I personally participated in interfaith event. We invited people. My husband and I, we invited all the ministers to our house. We cooked dinner just to make sure that people understand us.
One of the very touching things that right at that day, a group of Christians from different churches around here, they came to us and they offered their support. And in fact, the following Friday, which is, everybody knows that's going to be the big gathering, they came, different group of people, I think some Jewish as well, I'm not sure, and they surrounded the mosque on Ball Avenue, and they said, we are here to protect you in case any ignorant people may come and harm you.
Because after 9/11, I decided to wear my hijab and to say, you know, I'm a Muslim. And a lot of, give me a hard time for it. At work and out of work, too.
Something I learned later was that my mom and sister, because they were wearing hijab at the time, was that my dad, he was really nervous about it, and he was telling them, you guys should take it off because if, there's no need to be targeted. And that's something that a lot of people across America were doing, is a lot of people that, were more visibly Muslim were making changes, whether that was taking off hijab or whatever they were doing, so that they wouldn't be targeted, because there was an increase in, hate crimes, obviously, after that.
Every year on 9/11, we remember that day. And some of us remember it wrong. I know this last 9/11, my children's school had an event, and some little boy told my daughter, your mom did this. And it was hard to hear my daughter cry about it. And then for the school to inform me that she must have misunderstood what he said, which later was dealt with. But, even today, a child that wasn't even born at that time is still equating it to every Muslim. And so it's a tragedy that keeps burning within us.
The consequences of 9/11 was bad for Syria and Iraq, because then the United States invaded Iraq, and that spilled over. The country got weaker. ISIS became a power. They took over half of Syria, and so this is all probably 9/11 consequences. And it's really weird. I mean, Syria and Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11, but somehow I see we paid the price for it.
We have September 11, and everything stopped. Everything was afraid from Muslim. I don't know why. For example, I fill application in one factory. 2 weeks after, I asked my brother-in-law to take me to factory again, and he drove with me to factory, and we knock on door, and one guy came, and we asked about a girl who talked with me, and he said, who are you? What is your name? I told him, my name is Mohammed Salimovich. When I told him my name, I saw he's like, he was like scared for something, I don't know. And the brother, he said, did you see? I said, yeah. Did you see? He said, yes. He said, let's go. You can't find job here. I said, why? Because this is America. We have very, very nice view about America. But situation is situation, you know. People is not computer. People is working from mind, from brain, you know. And I left from factory and they never called me again.
One day, my daughter suffered from depression, bipolar, and she suffered from depression for a long time, long time. And I wanted to chill her. And I said, tell me how I can help you. She said, Mom, if you take off this scarf, you're gonna make me so happy. Because she wants to be like everybody else. Like, oh, going out to the mall with her mom and not being judged by the rest of the people.
As far as social media-wise, that's the first thing people want to throw at you as a Muslim. You know, I learned everything about Islam that I needed to know on 9/11. And what they don't realize is what happened on 9/11 had nothing to do with Islam, and it had nothing to do with practicing Muslims.
Any scary situation, any bad situation that occurs, try not to lose your temper, try not to lose your spirit, try to continue to be courageous and be patient, because any bad situation, sometimes good things will come out of it.
But that timing was so right, and there was some hope for rebuilding of the country, Afghanistan, as you were encouraged during that time, some hope for that. I had no idea what nonprofit was, but I said I want to have some kind of organization that I can expand the work and help those women and children that I left behind, because even though I was here, I always remember those people, and it always bothered me, and I always cried about it and did what I could. And I started a nonprofit in that time, and I was sitting down with just creating the name, what should we call it, because women and children have suffered the most. And that's why I called it Afghan Women and Kids Education Necessity. Women and children suffer so much, and I witnessed it, and I wanted to reach out to those two groups especially.
In the 2000s, it was a lot of students coming to Ball State studying and things, and there's no space for it, and the building was getting a little bit old too.
It was a neighborhood. Lots of students lived in the houses next door, and that was the mosque.
And the community then used to be much bigger. I'm talking about the residents, not the temporary ones who are students. So it was led by the resident here, have the ability, and we start raising money. And remember, we're still not that big. It took us about 10 years to finally come up with enough money to buy that.
They already bought the land to build a bigger place, but they found there is another building that is ready. They got, they can afford to buy it really. So they went ahead with buying the building and did it the new mosque for it.
The question was what was going to happen to the old mosque, and some people wanted to keep it because it was close to Ball State, and the other mosque was always going to be out on the west side, and so a lot of people thought it was going to go too far. But one of the benefits of having one mosque is that everybody is together. Not to say that everybody likes each other, that you don't have issues, because if you're a family, you got issues. But if you have two mosques, then it makes it easier for people to separate along different lines. So that's why we made the decision to only have the one mosque.
We had a little bit of opposition in the beginning from the African American brothers, because they said, well, this is going to be a little bit far from us, because the majority of them lives on the South Muncie area, not exactly south, but somewhere it's going to be further. And then we convinced them that, if you have any problem, commuting, we could help you. And there was no problem. In fact, the first president of that mosque was African American, who was Brother Amir Shabazz.
I was part of the committee to raise money for the new mosque. And we spent a lot of time trying to raise money and figure out what the rooms were going to look like. And, you know, we always had to push them a little bit for the sisters to have some space.
We have separate prayer room for the women. We didn't have it in the old mosque. We have our own room. We have our own set of bathrooms. We have our own set of closets. It's been a truly blessing, you know, it's very well organized and we have everything we need. Then plus we have a place for entertainment. That was like, again, a big factor, big part of our life to be able to bring other people. Like we just did the annual interfaith dinner on Sunday night. We had over 140 people there. And in the old mosque, we would not be able to accommodate and have this kind of gathering and speakers arrangement in our center. We also have a kitchen there. We can cook, we can heat up things, and kitchen was actually that when we were working on this building, remodeling it, they'd say, no, we don't need kitchen in the center. See why I wanted the woman representation and the woman voice. And I'm glad I was part of the building committee, otherwise they will not have a kitchen there. I said, no, we need kitchen, it's very important. I would say there's a different level. How would I describe the differences between that center to this center? That center was very small and it was very intimate, very family oriented, and different kind of connections to the community and as a community in large. But the new center, we thank God we have a classroom for children.
One thing that our community lacked because we didn't have many Muslims was, you know, other programs for kids outside of Sunday school. And so my sister and I decided to establish kind of an overnight camp at the mosque. For the kids, we arranged a lot of activities. It was during the summer, so like tie-dyeing t-shirts and then we made board games out of Islamic trivia. And we just wanted to have a fun experience for the kids outside of just school so they could have like positive associations with the mosque and feel more connected to the mosque and their faith, but also to their Muslim friends.
There's a Pakistani masjid that I go to, and it doesn't even sound right to call it that, but I mean, that's the predominant race of people that are there. So we call it a Pakistani masjid in Indianapolis that I've gone to several times. And, you know, we identify them that way. Oh, yeah, it's that Pakistani masjid or, you know, whatever. You can't define our masjid like that. The one here in Muncie, I mean, every time when I think I know where somebody, you know, you think you can look at them and say, okay, this guy, you know, from here, this guy from there, or whatever, you never know.
A very small community, few families, different nationalities. So you'll have people from India, Afghanistan. There are a lot of Saudi students. There are some Egyptian, Iraqis, refugees who came after the war. So, I mean, and they come and go.
Actually, being a small community, it could be a strength because you are closer to the other members of the community. You talk to each other more. You support each other more, and you care for the other people, for the other members of the community.
When I was able to attend the Islamic Center at the summer, or when we do not have something going on Friday, class-wise, or the studio, I was able to interact with different people. In one of the Isha, that was one of my few visits to the Islamic Center, Dr. Tariq, former president, he told me to lead the prayer. And he asked me before, do you know how to read the Quran? Do you know how to recite? I told him yes. And he doesn't know me, but in my mind I was saying, don't worry, I will do a good job. So yeah, I led the prayer. They were very pleased the way that I performed.
When I came here and I spent maybe a couple of months until I got into the society and got to know people, make friends, and touch at the very roots of just being a human being. Like, chill, there's nothing different here. Then I felt so comfortable.
Muncie. When I first received the letter of free settlement from the Institute of International Education, I didn't even know how to pronounce the word Muncie. I mean, if I would follow the English rules, it's like it should be Muncie, or what? And I even had to check with the director of the program, and she wasn't much of a help back then because she herself didn't know. But the name Ball State University is well known in the academic field in Iraq.
I start working even in the Islamic Center after I finished my master's degree. So I work there as a woman representative to do some activities for women and involve them more in the Islamic Center. So sending email for women to involve them in any activities in the community, making activities for them, and I start making activities for non-Muslim women to come to the Islamic Center. I did an Arabic class for them for 2 semesters actually. So we have level 1 and then level 2.
This, like I said, in my heart, I'm a Muslim, and I would tell people I'm a Muslim. And a friend of mine at work introduced me to a guy from Muncie that we work in Delville, and he introduced me to this guy. And he said, "Yeah, he's a Muslim. This is my friend Steve. He's a Muslim, you know." And so I met him, and he asked me, "Did I go to? Okay, do you go to the masjid?" And he asked me, "Do you go to the mosque?" And I said, "Where is it?" And he said, "Oh, there's one in Muncie." And I went on to tell him, "Look, I've been looking for one. I've been looking. So I would love to go with you." And so he invited me to go. I came here that day that he took me to the masjid. Amir Shabazz took my shahada. You know, the kind of man, he was a no-nonsense kind of man, but he had a good sense of humor. I mean, he would, I remember one time we had some dates. First time I ever had dates. So I went to the masjid this day, and they were passing out, dates. And so I look, I see, never ate a date before, so I'm eating, and I go, "Okay, so," I said, "Brother, how do you eat these things?" And he said, and he put one in his mouth, and he said, "You put it in your mouth," and he's just straight face, hardly ever laughed, right? "You put it in your mouth, you chew it, and you start swallowing, and the next thing you know, you eating." I respected him. I always felt like he was, I always wanted to do good around him, right?
I went to the Islamic Center in Muncie. It had recently moved. I know when I started scouting out the place, it was in a house over on Ball Avenue here by the university. And I was going to do something to it there, but there was just too much collateral damage around to normal Americans, right? That's the way I looked at it. They were normal Americans. These people were just evil, right? So I went there. And on a Friday, because I knew that's when they would all be there, and walked in. I was early. There was one guy that was there. He was in the shoe room. As I walked in the door, he saw me and I saw him, and he knew I was kind of out of place. So he just smiled at me and said, "Can I help you?" I said, "Yeah, I want you to teach me about Islam." He just smiled at me, kind of chuckled a little bit, and he says, "Well, how much time you have?" I said, "I got 2 hours." He says, "We'll give it a shot." He said, "Come on in here. If you got that much time, you're willing to sit through one of our, like a sermon. This is our day to worship together." And I said, "Yeah, that's cool. I can do that." So he sat me in the back row. We have the benches in the back row. He sat me in the back, After the sermon was over, they introduced me to somebody else, and we went into the library portion of the Islamic Center, and there was a couch in there at the time, and we sat down at the couch, and we were talking. And, because of course I didn't tell them that I had any ideas of doing any damage to anyone or anything here. I just said, I'm just curious about Islam. That's all. So this guy starts talking to me, and about that time, this older gentleman comes in, and he sits at my feet, and he hugs my leg and starts crying. This guy doesn't know me from anybody. And he's telling me about the love of Islam. So I'm like, man, there's got to be something more to this. There has got to be something more to this religion than what I have found out for myself. The guy I'm speaking with, he asked me if I've ever read the Quran, and I'm like, oh no, I've never read the Quran, man. He said, well, are you interested in it? I said, yeah, sure. So he goes over, he gets me a copy of the Quran, and he gives it to me. He said, just do me a favor, man. He says, just, kind of wash your hands before you read it, and don't take it into the bathroom with you. It's not a bathroom reading book, okay? And I said, oh, okay, I got you, man. It's cool. And so he gave me the best advice any Muslim can give any non-Muslim. Because a Muslim can talk to a non-Muslim all day long, 365 days a year for 10 years and still not cover Islam, okay? But he told me, he says, here, read the Quran, come back when you have questions. So I did. I was back all the time. I was back more often than some of the Muslims that are here go back. I was there all the time. Went to community dinners, got invited to people's houses. Long story short, 8 weeks later, I took my Shahada and became a Muslim.
And I think when Richard McKinney came to the center, whatever intention he had, he was so welcomed by the people there and comforted there and pay attention to him. And I think that itself made a huge impact in his life and changed his mind. And I think that's why he actually converted to Islam.
I took up the cause to start telling the truth and start explaining things and trying to dispel rumors and ignorance about the faith. Being someone that came from that side of things, once I broke out of that echo box, I was like just wanting to go out, and I was wanting to explain my story and wanting to show people that you can come from this hatred.
And then we told him, you come few times, you read about it, and then, you don't have to right away accept Islam. And so then eventually he was impressed, and he gave the witnesses to become a Muslim, and not only a Muslim, he became a MSA president, and then he will become the vice president of Islamic Center. Then after the situation evacuated, he became even the president of Islamic Center, and he did a great job, and we supported him all the way, and we still love him. And we actually, when the remaining term was over, we wanted to ask him to run for the second time.
There was a time in my life that I would have been on top of the world to have someone like Donald Trump in office. But now I'm ashamed. I'm ashamed because I'm a veteran, not because I'm a Muslim, not because I live in Indiana or because whatever. I'm ashamed because I'm a veteran. Because everything that I stood up for was supposed to be this idea of America. When people hear America, one of the first things that should come into their mind is freedom. What does America stand for? Freedom.
Well, Donald Trump sure knows how to grab a headline. He did it yesterday. The Republican presidential candidate called for the United States to block all Muslims from entering this country. He drew ferocious criticism, including from rival candidates.
It was just shocking to me to see, that somebody I know so closely supported the president of the USA, and his comments and remarks towards people of my religion and background.
I know when it happened, that was the summer that I didn't go back to Iran. I was working, and my parents went. And then my dad called me, and he was like, go change our tickets before president's inauguration. And I was like, no, he's not gonna do anything. Like, their ticket was like 4 days or 5 days after inauguration date. And I was like, it's only 4 days after inauguration. There's nothing major is gonna happen. So I did nothing. And then the day that their flight landed was the day that Muslim ban was put in. I felt so bad. I was like, if my parents aren't letting, like, I cannot forgive myself.
Some people were mean, and some patients, just because I was Muslim, they didn't want me to help them. I remember one of the patients, he said, oh, you're Muslim. Get out of here. You're going to kill me. And I say, no, I'm here to help you. No, Muslims wants to kill Christians. And so the nurse in charge, my boss, she was very good. She came and talked to the patient. And he said, no, she's here to help you.
I stopped wearing it because of an incident that happened at Walmart with my children. And it was this lady who approached me and ripped my hijab off and told me that we're in America, you don't have to wear this anymore. And what she didn't realize is that I chose to wear it. This was my choice. And my two daughters were with me, and they were very scared and confused at why this woman had done this. And she was very loud and aggressive. And for me, I didn't stop wearing it because I was scared it would happen again. I stopped wearing it for a while because I didn't want my kids to see that. And it wasn't until someone asked me why I had stopped wearing it that I realized that I had let this woman, who I'd never met before and probably would never meet again, change my feelings and my devotion. And so I've worn it ever since.
I actually had an instance with the teacher, a substitute teacher who I was at study hall, and he was going through roll call, and my name was first. And so I thought he was interested in where I was from because he was like, wow, your name sounds really neat. Can you tell me about your family? So I was like, yeah, my family's Pakistani. And he said, I'm so sorry. And I was like, I didn't know how to react. Because like at that point in my life, I was just like embracing like all those parts of me that I was really confused about. And then this man had to like feel bad for me that I was like, I'm actually proud of my culture now, and thank you for, saying that. So it was interesting to like kind of step back and be like, to wonder what people thought, especially when things started getting political in high school.
In one of the classrooms, it's an educational environment. An individual came up and they were explaining to the class the leadership in London. We know that the mayor of London is, I think, from a Pakistani background, Islamic background as well. And the way that they conveyed that to the class, that London, and within the saying of their presentation, one of the individuals said that the Islamic terrorism. That was just, there was shock came to all my body that how a saying can be said like that simply. It can be a mistake, that's fine, I understand, but I've been following issues, and I'm a big thing when it comes to the people that surrounds me, even they are Saudis, Muslims or not Muslims or whatever, that let's give a specific name to people. Let's not just group people in different ways or misjudge people.
heart of the Islam? That's kind of a big question.
To me, I have taught my children beyond religion, the first thing is that they have to be good people. They have to help others. They have to be kind. They have to be loving. This is my religion. That's what I feel.
The heart, one God.
The heart of Islam, the goal is to be pleased with yourself and for your God to be pleased with you.
Islam is about coexistence. Islam is about peace.
The heart of Islam is freedom.
Just the fact that she's so open, and I think there's a big thing sometimes about females wanting to be presented as less open in a way, or in terms of like friendliness. Like for instance, like she's very like she'll hug anybody and everybody, which not that everyone doesn't, but that's like a very big thing to be that welcoming, I think at least. And I haven't seen that before, especially in a female role.
So she's like the mom of the masjid, you know, and everybody is okay with that.
So when the elections came and her name was brought up to be president, I mean, there was no question about it. It was, of course, and she would do a great job. She's been doing, I mean, to be honest, regardless if she's the president or not, I think she'll still be doing the same thing that she's doing.
You know, I follow her lead. You know, she's you know, very strong lady, and she does some amazing things. And I don't have her creativity. I don't have her, you know, leadership ability. You know what I mean? I follow her lead, and I hope I can, you know, I hope I learn from her. Right? I do aspire to learn from her.
When we revisited the Constitution all those years ago, and we made the woman's sister's leader official, and she would have a spot, to me that was a beginning. Didn't even think that you would have a president, but it was the beginning of women officially being at the table. So it's a natural progression.
Then as a young girl, I always imagine, I don't know why, outside of my village, that there is more to life. I didn't read any books. I was no television, no newspaper in our life. And there was nobody who comes and talk to us to be that lucky somebody can tell us something about the world. We didn't have any of those resources and opportunities. But I always, as a girl, I use my imagination that there is more to life than only this little village. As a young girl, that I was just imagining things in my head. There should be something more than what we are having in this village. And ironically, that imagination, whatever like I saw in my head, and it came to reality of my life and when I came to the United States.
Leaving behind a legacy of fear and terror and even sometimes, I mean, all the achievements that we left behind. I had a normal life, and I had the family, and had all of these life goals in front of me, like being shattered. So coming here, it was quite the remedy I was looking for.
For the Muslim community, I hope it evolve. It is integrated well. I think, you know, the Muslim community here, they really feel they are American. We didn't have any bad things happening. So I hope we will continue the same, and you know, our children will evolve and go to good universities and have high degrees and be part of this society and be productive people. And you know, it doesn't matter whether you're Muslim, Christian, or Jew, or Hindu. I mean, what's the big deal? If you're a good human, you're a good human. Doesn't matter.
I'm doing an immersive learning project now to put solar panels on the roof of the Islamic Community Center. One person, he's not actually one of the Muslim community members. He donated $10,000 to the Islamic community with a condition that they use this for getting solar panels on the roof. And they reached out to me because of my background in construction and engineering, and I teach also an electrical class here, so I have some background on solar panels. So I started an immersive learning project. 10 students are working with me now to hopefully get this done by the end of the semester.
We take it for granted as people living in the 21st century, in the age of digital media and everything is available, that we know something about this culture and this religion. But unfortunately, that the more knowledge available, the more unaware that we become. So it felt so important for me that I convey the message of not only Muslims, but people from other parts of the world. So I participated in interviews, in news articles, in being a guest speaker at churches and on campus, and at international forums. I did a couple, and I'm planning to do more to explain we are human before we are Muslims. We're human, and we share a common destiny here on earth.
If I can change one person's view of the world or of Islam in particular, then I've done my job. If I can make it better than before I came, even in the smallest way, I've served my purpose.
There is no conflict with being a patriotic American. I love my country and I love my religion. I love Islam, and there's no conflict between the two.
Is just love each other and help the needed. Help people who is in need. I think that's for me, that's the most important.
When I came in here, the opportunity was unlimited. So when I have children, so there's one thing is not going to happen. While I'm living on this earth, my children are not going to live like I did.
I think your generation, honestly, when I speak to young people, I think they are more capable of changing this. They are more open-minded, they have more open minds, open hearts, to the extent that I think they can do a change in the future.
But I would hope that humanity live to continue in a greater understanding of each other, develop a sense of greater diversity and a greater understanding of how we are different as a human being.
That my children succeed in life. That's my personal hopes, but future happiness. Happiness is, I think, everybody's looking for. I think there is more good than bad. The bad is louder. The bad is there because many of the good are quiet.
To be safe. When you feel you're safe is the best part. Because you lived, I lived in many places and seen many places, but when you feel this is your, safe place, then this is your home.
It's definitely, this is my children's place. I need still live maybe 20, 30 more years, and I can tell it's most of my life is here. But I like America. I like Muncie because I find here all peace. I find my job. I have food. I have job. I have peace. Everything is here. And I love this place. I love this place. This is the reason why I didn't change. easy to change. If I find job in India I can go to India. If St. Louis, in St. Louis I have big number of my family. A lot of my family in St. Louis is over 60,000 population from Bosnia in St. Louis, and I like Muncie. I don't know why. I feel here like my born city.
And I tell, as a statistician, God was the greatest statistician because he believed in differences, in all this what we measure by standard deviation. If everything was identical, this would be some boring place to live.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي